actually going sort of an old school strategy. It was like right when the Knights got buffed type strategy, which is basically Knights and Mortar teams. So more peasants getting owned. This is just kind of unfortunate to watch. It's even worse because if he had actually put a couple farms in front in the Arcane Vault, he could have used his rifles and maybe put... you'll see where the upgrading guard tower is at the top, just above the Town Hall in the Arcane Vault. He could have put like a tower there and maybe to the right of it, and then actually built a scout farm so that whenever he actually starts to come around, he gets a few of the knocks from that. And then you can always try and pinch him in from there. So those are kind of base build issues to realize that you sort of need to do. They're pretty important, and they save a lot of troubles. Now, regarding the Ancient of War creeping, generally what people will do is if they're going to mass up a bunch of hunters, they're going to build a second Ancient of War, and they're just going to use the one for creeping, unless he just uprooted it now. I was going to mention this earlier, but oh well. If you missed that, the human almost got his hero caught. Anyways, you generally want to walk that Ancient of War around to more important creeps. So creeps with, well, not more important creeps necessarily. If you have a bunch of Huntress and Dryads, you don't want to walk that to a bunch of Ogres, because you're not actually going to get any reduced damage. So, you know, the Ogres are still going to do the same amount of damage to an Ancient of War as they will to a Huntress, and they won't actually be able to kill any Huntress unless you're really retarded about it, which I have done a couple times. You sort of want to take it to, like in his army composition case, you want to take it to a camp that has a lot of piercing damage in their creeps. Reason being, so I would take it to the Goblin Merchant, personally, and that's because Ancients of War take a lot of time to cart around, so you sort of want to save time and be pretty efficient with that. With your Ancient of Warness. Humans is kind of doing a weak harassment here. Generally you want to go for the Wood Wisps, but the Elf player actually has a good base build, and base builds are super important, especially in this matchup. And like you'll notice that both of his lures are behind his Moonwells, which sort of forces a human to either TP trade, because he's going to get stuck in there if he actually goes to try and take down your tier 2 buildings. Ouch, lost Wisp. That's a bummer. Or he'll be forced to buy a Zeppelin. So you're sort of forcing him into a situation by doing that. Replenishment Potion, that's not a bad item to have. Saves a bunch of Moonwells, but if you already have Bears out and you have Clarities, it's not a huge deal. In terms of map control, the one thing that the human player hasn't really got is map control, which is the one thing you're sort of aiming to achieve right after you set up the expo. And you'll notice he was sort of back down just because of the base build, and he lost a bunch of peasants. And the elf player was actually able to force a battle inside of his expo. So as a human player, your job is basically to force a fight outside of your expo to build up enough time to actually get the economic advantage. And here's the unfortunate part of chopping the trees at the top. I mentioned that earlier. But as I was saying, yes, you want to force fights outside of your expo, that way you can actually gain the monetary advantage you're aiming for, and you can gain momentum sort of at tier 2, or when the elf player hits tier 2, and basically what you can do is actually be able to take down their tier 2 buildings. This is why I like this hero combo. You can actually take down town halls and stuff. It's pretty great. What a lot of players don't do is get dual staffs, so you save 2 bears doing that. And it's actually pretty important if you're using this hero combination to get the dual staffs, so you can actually save bears and save your heroes, because your heroes are sort of a main source of focus, so you gotta be careful about that. Other mistakes from the human player. As far as army composition goes, no huge mistakes there. I mean, he obviously doesn't have an Arcane Sanctum as his main. He doesn't actually have towers as his main, like he has the one. So, that's one thing you actually want to do, is you sort of want to tower your main as well. Because I actually go to people's mains once they've set up an expo. Because a lot of people don't build towers there, and if they do, they're still upgrading. So I like to use that. But, yeah, it doesn't always work, but it's always nice to actually be able to have that option as the elf player. So when you're scouting, actually beware of their base build when you do that. Because if they do sort of have a blocked off base, I mean, yeah, they're probably going to build towers behind it. No surprises, right? But you actually want to make sure they do build towers behind it. Huge mistake by the elf player right here. He's broken upkeep with 51 gold at 51 food. Don't ever, 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 ever do this. He should have canceled the Dryad or something, or carted a bunch of his wisps from wood to gold and picked up a Shredder and broken upkeep that way. Either way, you don't want to break upkeep that early. I mean, he does have a significant advantage at this point, so it's not a huge deal, but that's one thing you want to do. As far as countering the Panda, you do want to get a lot of breakers early on, and that's one thing you should be aware of as the elf player, is that generally human players, if you're going like a Demon Hunter or a Warden, actually Warden's not a good example of that, I'm going to say Dark Ranger. Generally Panda and Warden, Panda especially, they're going to actually start getting breakers a little earlier, so they're not going to have as many sorcerers, and they're not going to have as many mortar teams. So you actually want to be able to counter the breakers. So you can either work on going bears or amassing huntress. They will eventually start to get mortar teams, but that's what the hero combo does that you have here with the Pit Lord and the Panda, is you can actually take out mortar teams fairly easily. You have the Drunken Haze and the Breath of Fire, and then you also have the Brain of Fire, which forces him to reposition his mortar teams and stuff. And what you can do with that is you can actually make him reposition his mortar teams and then send your Dryads out to the sides and pick off mortar teams if, you know, you actually have the micro to do that. It's a little difficult to do and it takes some battle awareness, but if you sort of slow down your game and actually focus on those kinds of things, like right now he's got his Dryads in a bad position. Obviously, Rifleman getting raped. This is why I prefer mortar teams, actually, if you go morts with breakers, is because you actually force his heroes to get out of position to be able to hit your heroes. Never been a fan of rifles. A lot of people swear by them, but I'm not one of those people. So, that's a biggie as a human player. You don't want to get your rifles in range. Pit Lord almost dies. Sort of lucky to hit level 5 there. Got the staff off. He's gonna lose a Dryad, which is unfortunate, but that's fine. Odd use of Blizzard there, I actually wouldn't have done that. And both use a TP, that's pretty spectacular. And all heroes make it away with less than 100 HP. So that was probably the coolest part of this replay. So yeah, the rifles were sort of effective, but he doesn't actually have any tier 2 buildings up now, so he's pretty toast. Like yeah, he is setting up the Arcane Sanctum, but by this point of the game, it's pretty over. So things to point out with this strategy. With the strategy that the elf player is using, is you want to hit level 3 on your Panda pretty quickly, and you want to actually be able to push the Expo as soon as possible. So when it comes to encountering his, you know, bunches of footies in his Archmage, if he does have a level 3, you're going to have a couple issues dealing with that, just because, you know, the Water Elementals actually do a lot more damage. Or the level 2 Water Elementals do a lot more damage and have a lot more hit points than the level 1s. So, you know, it's one of those, You can take them if you really want to, but you should wait for Dryads generally.